Welcome on into the Wolverine.com podcast. Clayton Safey along with Anthony Broom here on Thursday, May 22nd. As we send you into Memorial Day weekend, Chris Ballas not able to make it today, but we have some stuff to get to on the Michigan football and basketball side, some college football playoff news coming down here. Make sure to like this video if you are glad that Michigan hasn't lost to Ohio State in 2,000 days. That is today on May 22nd. Last time Michigan lost to Ohio State was 2,000 days ago, 2019. Completely different world at that point. Subscribe to our YouTube channel as well, and head to thewolverine.com as always to get all of our Michigan football, basketball, and recruiting coverage. You can use the promo code UM1 right now for 2 months of premium access for just $1. It's 50 cents a month. It's UM, and the numeral 1 is the promo code there. Anthony, it is party day. 2,000 days since Ohio State's beaten Michigan, and 100 days until Michigan opens up the season on August 30th against New Mexico.
Yeah, and X amount of days until it all gets vacated, right? No, that's not happening. Yeah, it's a milestone day. I think there were, obviously they didn't play during the COVID season, but honestly, after what happened in last year's game, you can't convince me that Michigan wouldn't have won that game too, being as shorthanded as they were without a passing game.
Was Ryan Day the coach back then?
He was.
Oh, okay. Interesting. That's a good.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you want to throw a hypothetical 5 in a row on it, I think you can do that.
No, they're claiming that one, even though.
That's fine. We can, if we can just claim whatever we want, then, we can claim that one too. Right. On behalf of the Michigan Wolverines. So, but yeah, I think there was a time where, not to bring up bad memories, but, after the 2018 game and certainly after the 2019 game, you're sitting there going, gosh, these were maybe the 2 best teams that Michigan's had under Jim Harbaugh, at least from a talent perspective. Like, when is it ever going to happen? And then to be where we are 5 years or so later, where not only do you have those wins over Ohio State now, but you have, I wrote about it a couple weeks ago, like you have your leg up in the aggregate too. You've got a national title and they have theirs too, but yours was an undefeated season. Yours came in a run where you didn't lose to Ohio State and you won 3 Big Ten championships. So yeah, 2,000 days is it's a day to celebrate. Just being better in the aggregate over the last 4 years, regardless of, tip your hat for their 12-team playoff title last year. But, in years past, that wouldn't have been possible to do with 2 losses and not having a conference title to your name. So, yeah, happy days. And Michigan will actually go for 5 in a row on the field this fall. And I feel like, as we continue to put together this football preview and you look at what some of these other teams have, Michigan's got a great shot to make it 5 in a row this year.
This rivalry truly is cyclical. It just goes through these different eras, and it's what makes it exciting. The storylines where you're right. It looked like at one point Michigan would never beat Ohio State again. Really, I mean, my entire lifetime was losing to them. And I was talking to my brother about this the other day because we were just talking about the 2023 game and just how important that was. And all the car rides back from 2013 game, and you come up a point short. In 2015 you get blown out at home. 2017 just kind of shorthanded there. And in 2019, the year coming into the season when you were favored to win the Big Ten, but Ohio State stayed atop that mountain. It felt like any different situation that there was in this rivalry, it wasn't going to happen. And then it shows you how quickly things can change as well. In 2021, when you least expect Michigan to have a turnaround season coming off of what 2020 was, they did it. So it's a reminder to enjoy that when you're on top.
Not only that, we sort of talked about this. Spoiler alert, we spoke to Brian Bush, and that'll be a show that's out Monday, which is phenomenal. We went a little longer. Great chat, a lot of fun. But we were talking about this in that conversation. We talked about how, Aiden Hutchinson's a guy that goes up there at Big Ten Media Days that, before that 2021 season, talks about how the culture's changed. And Jim Harbaugh went viral, as he had a tendency to do, for saying they were going to beat Ohio State and Michigan State or die trying, and got laughed at. And even by some of us I'll admit it, you hear that come out of his mouth at media day and you're like, All right. Well, we'll see. Like, I'll believe it when I see it. And not only did I see it, I think what we saw when that started, this little run of dominance over the last 4 years or so, is that was one of the maybe the most memorable, picturesque day I can ever remember at that stadium. And there were obviously great moments that came after it. The 2 wins in Columbus, the 2023 game was just an epic back and forth battle throughout. But that first one in 2021, after all of the hoopla and the beat Ohio State or die trying, that was legendary stuff. And I'll never forget that.
No doubt. I mean, it was the modern version of the 1969 game that just turned the tide for Michigan in year one under Bo Schembechler. People thought maybe that could be what Michigan did in 2015. There were a lot of parallels that year. It took longer, but as Gus Johnson said at the end of that one, finally, they got that win over Ohio State. And, as Jim Harbaugh said, we're going to beat them or die trying. We haven't seen anything else since then. And Donovan Edwards said after the 23 game, we ain't never losing to Ohio State, baby. And Leon Franklin said, 2021, whooping that ass. 2022, whooping that ass. 2023, whooping that ass. And then, of course, last year, the same exact thing, 13-10. Still amazing that one, probably, easily the most improbable of them. But in a way, in hindsight, it's like, oh, yeah, it kind of makes a little bit of sense. But that's some bias there, obviously hindsight bias. But
I remember doing the podcast in the lead up to that game. I was in Fort Myers that week for the Michigan, for the Fort Myers tip-off, where Michigan basketball was there. And the other claim to fame, first career made 3 for Vlad Golden. Got to see that in person.
What was bigger that week? Yeah.
Oh, it's hard to say. You walk out of there, Fort Myers tip-off champions. That's a milestone in its own right.
Simply known. Yeah.
I just remember sitting there doing the pod, and I think at some point I said, listen, this would certainly be the most shocking of the, given they were 3 touchdown underdogs, it would be the most shocking win. It would also be the most hilarious by far. And did I expect us to drive out of the parking garage across from the Horseshoe that Saturday cackling that it happened again? No, but it certainly was the funniest of them. And certainly now that when you see what happened after that with the Buckeyes, it's just kind of, there's all this talk about, asterisk next to national championship seasons. I'll put that asterisk next to theirs until my dying breath.
Wow. Well, we'll talk about the state of the college football playoff because changes could be coming here this season in 2025 coming up, which is very late to do that. But we will talk about that. We're going to talk about some assistant coach moves. We are going to discuss Yaxel Lendeborg. We'll give final predictions on what we think he's going to do, whether it's staying in the NBA draft or coming to Michigan. And Patrick Liburd, new commitment for Michigan basketball that we haven't talked about on the podcast yet. We're going to break his game down and his commitment. 4th member of Michigan's freshman class coming in, small forward out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Let's start with the assistant coach. Contract extensions. 6 Michigan football assistants were extended. Most notably, Steve Casula, the tight ends coach, is promoted to co-offensive coordinator. 25% pay bump for him, up to $500,000 this coming season. Of course, Casula was the interim offensive coordinator in the bowl game against Alabama after Kirk Campbell was hired. Before Chip Lindsey really took over the offense, he was hired by then, but wasn't officially coaching that game. So 190 yards in that bowl game, sure, co-offensive coordinator, baby. But obviously there were much deeper issues. I'm joking there, no disrespect to Steve Casula at all. I think well deserved. Assistant coaches who receive pay bumps. Running backs coach and run game coordinator Tony Alford goes to $900,000 per year from $850,000. Defensive line coach Lou Esposito up to $600,000 per year from $500,000. Ron Bellamy, Lamar Morgan, and Grant Newsome received contract extensions through the 2026 season, but did not receive pay raises. They'll be on the same salary structure as they were before. And then the 3 that didn't receive extensions at all. J.B. Brown heading into his final year of a 2-year contract. Wink Martindale and Brian Jean Mary had already signed 3-year contracts before last season, so they're still through the 2026 season. They have that security, and Wink Martindale, I believe, set to make 2.5 or 2.7 million this year, so good for him. Did you make anything of Casula being named a co-offensive coordinator? And the other stuff seems fairly status quo, I would say.
I don't know that there's a whole lot to make of it. Now, it was either last week or the week before. Maybe we talked about this with JD Pickell. I don't remember in the here and now, but operationally, assuming that Sherrone Moore is going to be suspended at some point this year, we talked about what that might look like in terms of preparing the staff, maybe empowering the staff a little bit more to have a role in game planning and setting things like that. This might be part of that when it comes to you slap a co-coordinator title on Steve Casula. Now, let's say if Chip Lindsey is your interim coach for a couple games, Steve Casula can kind of take on more of the, whatever duties are needed in terms of picking up the slack for, obviously, Chip Lindsey having to pick up Sherrone Moore's slack. So that was kind of my initial takeaway from it. Again, he's also a guy that, when you look at who they are and what they're about, I think there's a lot of alignment there in what Steve Casula brings, how he coaches his tight ends, how they're going to factor into this offense moving forward. And he's a guy who's obviously called plays at UMass. He's been an analyst at Michigan, has kind of been around and been with this brain trust, at least from a Sherrone Moore perspective. So I just see it as more of an empowerment and maybe a contingency in terms of, hey, when we need to make some kind of move, when Sherrone is out, we can put a little more on this guy's plate because, hey, we put a little more money in his pocket and gave him a new title as well. So that was my initial takeaway. As far as the other guys go, I think that the pay raises were earned. They're well earned, deserved, and we'll see where it goes from there. But that was my takeaway on the Casula thing.
Interesting. I hadn't thought of the suspension part of it. I think that if Chip Lindsey's your interim head coach, he's got to stand over there when the defense is on the field. So someone's got to be kind of running the, adjustments over on the offensive side. Of course, they'll be on the headsets, but that could change things, from how they operate on the sideline there.
And that's me spitballing too. But right. And you don't just name someone a co-coordinator because you might be suspended for 2 games. There are other reasons for that. They felt like he did a good job in bowl prep. He's been around. He knows, kind of what the vision is. So I think that all plays into it, but I don't think that no chance the suspension played a part as well.
And he also did call plays at Davenport from 2014 to 2016. Worked with Lou Esposito there when Lou was the head coach. I would have loved to attend a practice of one of those. Those are 2 fiery guys. Ferris State, he called plays from 2017 to 2018. So he does have that offensive coordinator experience. One of the reasons why Sherrone Moore promoted him last bowl season. And then the other part of this is that this is just kind of the way things go in college football now. When you look at Michigan's offensive staff, of Steve Casula as a co-offensive coordinator, Ron Bellamy is passing game coordinator, Tony Elford is running game coordinator. If you look at the defense, Brian Jean Mary is run game coordinator, Lamar Morgan's pass game coordinator, Wink Martindale is coordinator. There are just a lot of coordinator tags out there now. There are recruiting coordinator tags and all sorts of things. So a lot of it's title, right? You get a pay raise, and then you also get this extra title with it. And who knows how much it actually means, because they're all really involved with different areas of game planning and in coaching throughout the year and in a game and all these different things. But still notable that Sherrone Moore made some of these moves heading into his second season. 9 of 10 assistants are back. The only one replaced was Kurt Campbell. So a lot of continuity on that staff this season. Let's talk about the college football playoff and some moves. But before we do, we have to talk about the Michigan Football Preview magazine by us at the Wolverine. Don't miss out on the 2025 Michigan football preview. It's our annual 160-page glossy yearbook, and this will be the 37th year of publication. Pre-order your copy before the end of June 16th and get free shipping. If you're a subscriber with us over at thewolverine.com, you have an even better deal. Go online to order either way at bit.ly/um-show, or just click the link in the description to the video or the podcast. So we're excited about this one coming out this summer. Again, 37 years. Ton of legacy there with this magazine. So Bryce Underwood on the cover. Make sure to go get your copy. You're going to want to keep this one for a long time. The college football playoff is leaders with the CFP are meeting today. Maybe this meeting has already happened, but Ross Dellinger this morning says CFP executives scheduled for a call today where many of them expect to adopt a straight seeding model for the 2025 playoff that would feature a financial compromise. Sources tell Yahoo Sports. He says the financial compromise distributes the same revenue, $8 million, to the 4 champions, even if they're not inside the top 4. That's 4 top-rated conference champions. So essentially, this is a move that, I think a lot of us thought right away when they came out with this 12-team model they should have, that it didn't make a ton of sense. Like, I understand it. You're rewarding the top-rated conference champions by giving them a bye, but also it's not the top 4 teams in that top 4 that gets a bye. So last year, the top 4 seeds that would have gotten buys under this model, where you just go 1 through 12, those are the seeds, would have been Oregon, Georgia, Texas, and Penn State. And Anthony, you and I talked a ton going into last season. We ended up being pretty accurate here that the number 5 seed might be the best spot to get under the model that we had last year in 2024, because that was Texas a year ago. They had a home game against Clemson, which was really, like, I think number 15 in the country, something like that. But they were the 12 seed because they won their conference. And then they were favored on a neutral field against Arizona State, Pac-12 champion. Now, both those games ended up being pretty decent games, but you would take those matchups, I think, going into it. They ended up beating Arizona State in overtime. The Clemson game was close, but still a good draw, and probably a better draw than, the 4 seed, Arizona State, not as good of a team. And then Penn State also was the 6. They had a home game against SMU, blew them out, and then a neutral site game in which they were favored against Boise. They win that 31-14. So the loser of the Big Ten championship game, Penn State, got a much better draw than the winner of that game, Oregon, who then had a bye and then plays Ohio State, gets blown out in the Rose Bowl. So I think this evens things out. Like, number 5 and 6, those are still good spots to be in, but only relative to the teams below you, not to the teams ahead of you in the seeding. So I would like this, and apparently if it's voted upon today, which it looks like it will go to a vote, they're expecting this to pass and be implemented right away in 2025.
And I'm fine with it. Let's get rid of the conference title games now altogether, and just, now we're really cooking. That's not going to happen either because there's too much TV money on the line. But, I'm for this. Do it like the NCAA tournament. Just get the best teams in there, seed them according to whatever your criteria is, 1 through 12, and let's play football. The graphics on the screen right now of what some of these other matchups would have looked like, and that entire first round of games is just, at least on paper, a lot more competitive than what we wound up getting. Now, again, it's all hypotheticals, but there's still part of me that, part of the advantage, obviously, of being a top 4 seed is you get the bye, but you would think an advantage for you would also be hosting a game as well. But they play at these neutral sites. They want to get the bowls involved. I don't know if that's something that can be fixed in the future. I doubt it. But, in the here and now, let's just, again, when we're just trying, what would the college football playoff ought to do? They were going to put the 4 best teams in there, regardless of conference titles, regardless of auto bids and things like that. If we're expanding, let's get the 12 best teams in there, regardless of conference titles, regardless of this, regardless of that. Now, there's going to be interesting debates in the room about who needs to be seated where, and certain other criterias and whatnot. This is still just an invitational. It's called a playoff, but it's just an invitational. That's what it is, because a bunch of people in a room are deciding who's in and where teams go. But I think that if they just embrace that, that's what this is, and let's get those 12 best in there. Zero issues with that at all. So looks good to me. Looks fun to me. I think at this point, let's just get it to 14. I think we're going to go to 14 probably next year or two. It'll get to 16 before too long. And that feels about right from there. So we'll see how it goes. I like the proposed change. And we'll see. It might be pushed through by the time you hear this episode, which is just a lot of momentum behind that today.
Yeah, and it's worth noting too, like, you win your conference and you're a top 5 conference champion, you're still in the playoff. You just don't get that first round bye. So Clemson gets in last year as the 15th or 16th, whatever they were, team in the country.
Sorry, not to interrupt you. Let me just say this. We are recording at 2:23 p.m. on Thursday. 19 minutes ago, Ross Dellinger tweeted, college football playoff executives in a call today unanimously adopted a move to straight seeding for this year's playoffs. So this is official. This is official.
That was 2 minutes into the start of this pod. So there we go. So pretty much everything we said, just take it as if it's already been implemented, because it has been, it looks like. So I like that. I think that here's the other thing it does, Anthony. It does incentivize wanting to win your conference championship. Like Oregon, again, they got a worse draw by winning that game. Of course, you're going to go out there and try to win. But now, if you're the Big Ten champ, you're going to be a top 4 team. If you're the SEC champion, you are going to be a top 4 team and get a bye. And it's in a structure where that bye doesn't give you a worse draw than the loser. So it works both ways in that aspect. So, that's kind of nice, because I was on the Huge Show the other day and we were talking about how, really winning the conference doesn't really matter anymore. Now, with this change, which I didn't know was happening 3 days later, I was on Monday, it does again. So disregard kind of what that argument that I made if you were listening to the Huge Show. But so I like that. And like you said, it looks like in future seasons, starting in 2026 and beyond, they're going to go to the thing with the most momentum right now looks like it's 16-team format, where you have automatic qualifiers, 4 for the Big Ten, 4 for the SEC, and then 2 for each of the ACC and the Big 12. ACC meetings happened last week. They were not fans of this proposal, but the Big Ten and SEC have all the leverage and pretty much control the fate of the playoffs. So I guess you'd have those first round games, 13 versus 16, 14 versus 15, in the second weekend of December, the Army-Navy weekend. And then from there, you play out a 14-team bracket. There are different buys. Top 2 seeds in the CFP would earn a bye into the quarterfinals on New Year's Day. The double bye would be designated for those winning conference championship games. So that would, you kind of bring that structure back into play.
Let me ask you this. How many consecutive years of change to this format do you think we're going to see, including conferences realigning and who knows what happens with the NCAA? But how many years in a row do you think there's going to be some kind of change to this, to where we have something enduring that stays as is, like the NCAA tournament has?
I think it's going to be at least 3. That's not I guess it's already at 2, right? Last year was different. I guess if you count, 4-team in 2023 of the last one, 2024, 12-team, 2025, 12-team, but straight seeding, 2026, 16-team. That's not official yet, but I would predict that. So that's 4 in a row. And then if you're including realignment, like you said, I don't know when this would happen, but is it possible that in 2027, Florida State and Clemson leave the ACC and we see reshuffling of, how many automatic qualifiers? Like if the ACC loses them, they may only deserve 1 automatic qualifier. I would hate to see that happen, but you're right. We could see 4, 5, 6 years in a row here of change to a format that really didn't change to its own fault for so long. You had the 2 teams for a while, then 4 teams for 10 years, and now rapid change, which goes along with everything else in college football. You're seeing tons of change all over.
And let me say this. I prefer all of this to, so many people there are things about the old days of college football that we're missing, traditions, rivalries, things like that. But what I don't miss is having the Associated Press name a national champion and having the coaches name a national champion, and you just settle it on paper. Like, let's settle it on the field. 4-team playoff was awesome. The 12-team playoff, you look at what Ohio State did. I'm not here to give them their flowers on a Michigan podcast, but winning 4 games against, what the committee decided was the 12 best teams in the country, that's incredibly earned and impressive. All of this does take away from what used to be, I think, the best regular season in sports, but it's not bad. It's just different. And it's something that we got to get used to. And, so much of it is need to start taking this sport the way it is instead of the way we'd like it to be. And when you frame things through that perspective, then you can kind of find solutions for how do we make this iteration of the sport the best it can possibly be. Because guess what? We're not going back to just the best 2 teams in the country playing the last game of the season. We're not going back to
the best 2. Who knows how? I mean, last year the 6 seed won.
Exactly. I mean, look no further than, the debates that people have around 1997 around how silly all of that is in terms of, well, the coaches did this, but it was maybe it was a retirement gift for Tom Osborne and all that type of stuff. Like, let's settle it on the field. Let's get it right. I just feel like we're on a slow. I used to think it was a speeding freight train to the 2 super conferences and being, like the NFL model. Now it's just kind of a slow trickle where each year we get a breadcrumb that I feel like is getting us closer and closer to that.
They've screwed almost everything up. This is better. I'm for expansion. The more the better, and the straight seeding I think makes sense. Anthony, the best part, maybe most exciting part of the 16-team model with 4 automatic qualifiers for the Big Ten, 4 for the SEC, is that the Big Ten and SEC with unbalanced schedules are going to want to have their best 4 teams get those automatic bids. And how they could do that is through some play-in games, like 3rd, 4th games, things like that. That would be exciting to kind of like, instead of the conference championship game, you'd have 3 versus 6 and 4 versus 5 in the conference. The other 2 are in already and are maybe co-champions or whatever, depending on record. If one's better than the other, then one's the champion, how it used to be just by record. Then we're talking some exciting games on that first weekend of December.
You laid it out perfectly. I think, we're not getting rid of conference championship games. Like, that's one of those, don't even have the conversation because it's not happening, but how do we make this better? That's the ticket. You have your conference title game
with more,
and then you have the play-in, and it's all tied into the playoff. So for me, that's I love that. I think that's the way to go.
Yeah, you just let those 2 teams hang out, and you put, instead of a conference championship game, you have 2 games that day for your conference, and we make it just it would be one of the more exciting. I'm sure they do like Friday, Saturday, Sunday. They already kind of do that, but it would be maybe more exciting than the playoff, because everything's on the line in the playoff too. But I guess the same amount is on the line. It's basically an extension.
Yeah, I guess think about. Let's just take the Big Ten championship game. It's played at 8:00 on Fox. That's not going anywhere. But now, can you imagine a scenario where the lead into that game is maybe at 3:30 or so? We play the play-in game, and then it's almost kind of like a Big Ten tournament feel where instead of just having the 2 fan bases there, now you've got the 4 there to watch 2 football games. And I think that could be a lot of fun. Because we're trying to make what we currently have better, right? Like, we're not trying to roll stuff back, not trying to get rid of games. And given that it's all about TV money and eyeballs, you don't think Fox wouldn't love to have essentially a college football playoff play-in or seeding type of game, followed by, the what comes after that, the Big Ten championship. I think that they'd be head over heels for that.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong. They would get rid of the championship game though, right? They would just play the play-ins because the other 2 would be in, or would they still play?
I wonder. Because then, so here's what would be interesting is that if you're playing the championship game,
it's more irrelevant than the other two.
Well, you would be playing. Oh, because you're saying there's two playoff.
But you'd be playing for a potential double bye, so maybe they would keep it.
Yeah, I would think you would just keep the Big Ten title game and then play another game. No, I'd have to workshop this, but because if the team that loses the Big Ten championship game in a certain set of circumstances could feasibly get leaped by a team that plays in the play-in game, right? Is that a possibility?
Right. I mean, they'd probably guarantee the top two an AQ spot, but you could be worse in seeding than maybe the 3 that beats the 6 on that weekend.
Well, someone smarter than us at Fox or whomever is probably watching this, taking notes and saying, these two idiots are onto something. They can't quite verbalize it, but they are onto something here. So
we're onto something that's very far down the, they're working on this. And this is interesting from Ross Dellinger. What's that?
Folks, this is called a tangent.
This is from Ross Dellinger too. Those conversations continue as to discussions whether the play-in losers remain eligible for the 3-team at-large pool. So you could be like in that 4. Let's say you're the 3 in the Big Ten. You lose, you could maybe still get an at-large bid. So there's a lot of benefit to being in the Big Ten or SEC right now. There really is.
Not to go off on another tangent, but doesn't 4 seem like a lot anyways? Like the Big Ten got in 3 last year?
I want to say Ohio State, Penn State, Oregon, and Indiana. They got in 4.
Oh, so there were 4. You're going to have years where the 4th Big Ten team that gets in there is not better than maybe a team that gets left out from another conference.
And that's precisely why the Big Ten wants to do it, right?
Yep.
And the SEC, because they hold all the leverage. And I mean, the SEC was pissed about Alabama not getting in last year. Of course, then they lose in their bowl game to University of Michigan. But so this is why, I mean, if you're the ACC and the Big 12, you can complain, but you're not in control here. You're not in the driver's seat. You're in the back.
I take it all back. Let's just vote for a national champion again. This is too complicated.
Too much math. So hopefully people follow that. I know I probably sounded like an idiot throughout, but
no, I confused myself. So I can only imagine how it came across over the air.
But we're feeling it out. It's Memorial Day weekend almost, and we're talking ball, so that's good. Let's talk a different type of ball, round ball, basketball. Michigan getting a commit on the hardwood last Friday. Patrick Liburd, Ricky Liburd, however you want to say it, 6'6", 180 pounder, who is a really good athlete and can shoot the basketball 49% from 3 last season, which is fantastic. Helped lead his team, Sagemont Prep, to a 3rd straight state championship in Florida. He was originally signed with Coastal Carolina back in November. The assistant coach that was his primary recruiter left on May 1 to go to Florida Tech, take a different job. He gets out of his letter of intent, takes a look around after a big senior season, mind you, in which his stock grew, and had some higher opportunities. Florida State, Michigan were the 2 teams that pushed for him. He decides to leave the state, say no to Florida State, and come up to Michigan. He has seen snow before. He said he played in Slovenia on the international circuit before, and I said, buddy, get ready. I didn't say this, but get ready to learn winter coat, because it is, it's one thing to go over there for a week. It's the other thing to be here for months and months and months. But I'm not trying to convince him not to come. He's locked in. He'll be here on June 12. Averaged 16.4 points, 6.2 rebounds, 2.6 assists per game last season. And, this is one of those high ceiling, probably take a year or 2 developmental additions for Dusty May and company. But when they say they got a kid who was signed at a mid-major school from the state of Florida that they want and they believe in at Michigan, I'm good with that.
Yeah, I'm not going to sit here and say he's the next LJ Kaysen and that he has a locked-in role for next year. Maybe he does. Maybe he gets on campus and looks incredible and works himself into the rotation. I'm not sure, but this does feel like, as they put the finishing touches on this roster, still waiting on Yaxel Lendeborg. Still waiting on, maybe there's another a prep guy out there to grab, as a lotto ticket. And this is that type of addition, a lotto ticket. You trust the staff's evaluation. You trust that, I'm sure their pitch is like, hey, you can go, there's a lot of schools you can probably go to, but we have a plan for you here. We think that if you stick with our program for however many years, that we're going to turn you into the best version of yourself that you could possibly be. So for that, I think it makes a lot of sense. I think certainly when you look at the guys from the freshman class who have a chance to make an impact, he would be last on that list for me. But you give Dusty May and the guys that he has evaluating talent the benefit of the doubt that long term and maybe even short term, we'll see what happens. They feel like they have something here. So always excited for, I think that's something they proved last year is that the guys that they take, they have a lot of conviction about, and they have something in mind for them. And I'm not gonna bet against Dusty May pulling guys out of the state of Florida at this point. I know we don't have we have the information that's been available to us in terms of LJ Kaysen, and we saw what he did at FAU. Just giving that guy the benefit of the doubt. So I don't know what he looks like long term, but like the addition, I think it makes a lot of sense and rounds out this roster fairly well.
I feel like that Florida pipeline is just going to continue. They got great relationships down there. Now they did add some other guys from Florida who were transfers last year. Sam Walters, Trey Donaldson. I'd say Walters doesn't get hurt. That kind of worked how you expected it was going to. He's going to play a limited role, hit some shots. And then Trey Donaldson, probably worked as well as you thought. Probably, more there in terms of a true point guard, but maybe isn't that guy that maybe people expected him to be. But by all accounts, I mean, they don't have the season they have without Trey Donaldson. So they've got a lot of relationships down there. There's a lot of respect for this staff down in Florida as well. In talking to Patrick Liburd last night on Wednesday night, I came out of that with the feeling that yes, he is going to be pretty patient. Like Dusty May told him he's going to be in the mix to play. No one has a spot and everything's going to be earned. But he also touched on that he understands how good this staff has been developing players and, helping them come along and helping them play a certain role. So I think he understands, right? Your choice was between, originally Coastal Carolina, Cornell, Princeton, Murray State, Brown. Those were the schools recruiting him initially. And then he wanted to take a look around and maybe knew there was going to be high major interest. It's Florida State, it's Michigan. So I think he made the decision to be a little more patient in terms of playing time rather than to go to a mid-major and play more right away. So in that respect, I feel like this could work. He's probably going to be here multiple seasons. You never know now, but I would imagine that he understands kind of what this situation is. And this is a product of having 15 scholarship spots now, as opposed to 13, where you can take a guy that might take a little bit more time, that if he would have popped off this year at Coastal, you got to pay, 1.2 for him in the portal next year. Like you can take some guys and stash them a little bit.
That I think that's the key word is take a guy and stash. Now you look at their scholarship chart. They've got, I think, 3 spots left. That's with Lendeborg in the mix. Now we'll see. I know we'll talk about his decision here in a little bit, but it's hard to get to 15 is the other thing. You can get yourself to 13, I feel like somewhat easily, but to get to 15, I wonder if you'll see some of these walk-ons that were with the program be elevated to get to that number. I honestly still don't even know how that's going to work with what counts, what doesn't against the limit, because it doesn't seem like we can get that figured out with this house settlement either. So I don't know if you have anything to share on that, but I like it. And with the amount of spots available, it makes a lot of sense. And if you think a guy might have something there, stash him for a year, get him in your program, see what he can do, and we'll check in with you in 26.
With the way I understand how this house settlement is kind of evolving, is that they're going to grandfather in those guys that are already on the team. So really, you do have 3 spots. I think you could still see another addition to the freshman class. I know we've kind of hinted at that. a little bit. And then, you don't have to use all of them, but you would have room for even 2 more beyond that. 3 right now, like you said, they're at 12, and that's with Yaxel Lendeborg. So, because Charlie May, Harrison Hochberg, I think they would be grandfathered in, assuming that the judge Claudia Wilkins not approving this settlement without the grandfathering into those spots. So, I think you're kind of good. You got as many spots really to work with as you could possibly imagine on May 22nd, because there aren't that many options out there yet. You could still grab a few options that you do have. Yeah. So Ricky Liburd, 4th member of the class. Anything else before we make our quick predictions on what Yaxel's going to do, because this deadline is coming up in less than a week?
No, I'm ready for that.
UAB transfer, Yaxel Lendeborg is committed to Michigan, going through the NBA process, and has until May 28 at 11:59 p.m. Not midnight on the 29th, Anthony. He probably has till 11:59 and 59 seconds, but I actually think it is written in for the NBA that it's 11:59. So maybe they do have to be that precise, but he's got to make his decision. Is he going to stay in the draft? Is he going to play a year at Michigan and collect money at Michigan too, right? It makes these decisions a little more complicated these days. I don't think it'd even be a thought in his mind, but to go to the NBA draft pre-NIL, but now you can still make money here. Latest ESPN mock coming out of the combine has him at number 26 to the Nets, but that's a team that ESPN wrote about, saying that there are rival teams expecting them to move one or both of those picks in the 20s. They also have the 27th. And Jeremy Wu writes that it wasn't clear by the end of combine week as to whether he had done enough to secure the type of guarantee that might keep him in the draft. He was highly productive at UAB last season, will step into a role with the Wolverines as an ostensible replacement for Danny Wolf, giving him an opportunity to improve his draft stock if he withdraws now. He really can't go wrong here. What is your gut feeling on what Yaxel does?
I feel like he's going to come. I really do. And I thought the wording on that story was pretty where, you've got, I know it was Jeremy Wu's sentiment, but Jonathan Givony, has been pretty connected with all this too. I don't think he would sign off on any takes on something that his name is on that wasn't accurate of how maybe the situation is. But to word it as he could improve his draft stock if he just goes back to, or if he drops out and goes to Michigan now. I don't know if I'm reading too much into that, but that feels like sourced intel coming out of the combine. I think it was also, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Is it John Hollinger over at The Athletic also said something similar where, it doesn't seem like he did enough at the combine to get the promise he's looking for. And that's not to say someone might not still take him, but it really does feel like when you, and shout out to you were down there, you talked to him, talked to, a couple of the Michigan guys. But when you listen to Yaxel Lendeborg's comments, and I know there was one day where he said it's 60-40 Michigan, but the next day it was actually closer to 50-50, whatever that is. You listen to the guy talk and you listen to what the analysts are saying about, I don't think he's going to get the prediction the promise he's looking for. I just feel like this is shaping up really nicely for him to land with this team. And who knows, obviously as we sit here, he's got 6 days to make the call. It could come sooner than that. Wouldn't be surprised to see that over the holiday weekend. That's just a gut feeling, but I think he's coming here. And I think that Michigan's going to enter next season as one of the most talked about teams in the country.
And you can't look at that roster with him on it and not think that's a legitimate national title contender. There's just so much talent on it. And he's that pro, that next level type of player that would take you to that potential ceiling, which is winning the national championship. And I agree with you. I think that if I had to choose one right now, which I do because we're on a podcast and this is the topic, I would say he comes to Michigan. And, I think you bring up all the great points. Like, as of right now, May 22nd at 2:47 p.m., I don't think he has a promise from a team in the first round. And that's because of what was written coming out of the combine. That's because our Joe Tipton over at On3, our coworker, talked to Yaxel this week, and he said he still plans to take this thing right up to May 28th, the deadline. And that tells me that up until May 28th, and they'll have some leverage there with NBA teams too. Hey, he's going to withdraw. You're not going to have a chance to draft him if you don't give him a promise right now, because we're ready to go back to college at 11:59. It tells me right now he doesn't have that promise. They're going to keep pushing teams to give him that in the next 6 days. But I mean, I think Michigan has by the day, the chances of Michigan landing him are growing and growing and growing. And man, when we're sitting here next week doing the pod talking about what this roster looks like after his decision, I think we're going to be talking about one with Yaxel Lendeborg on it. And I think it's going to be a pretty fun show, Anthony. But that's just my guess at this point. It could go the other way.
I think I agree with you. And so much, maybe we table this discussion until he does make a decision or he does decide to come to Michigan. But with him on this roster, they are a national title contender. And people will say, oh, well, the Big Ten hasn't won one since the year 2000, blah, 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 blah. I think we need to start retooling that type of mindset, because the teams that are going to win in college football and in college basketball are the teams that pay and are the teams that have the money to put together elite rosters. And Yaxel Lendeborg is ready to come to Michigan because that money is there. And we know that that there are some other guys there they brought in that took a pretty hefty NIL investment to bring in. We look at Merez Johnson and Elliot Cadeau and some of their own guys. So that roster with this coaching staff has the chance to be something special on paper. Now, we've seen teams that have been special on paper before at Michigan that it didn't pan out. There was a couple of them in the Juwan Howard era, and I'm not equating the two staffs, but you got to play the games. But
there are also years when we have the paper wrong. Like, then they get on the floor. You know what I mean?
Right. Right. You can always play that game either way, but he comes, it completely changes the ceiling of this team. And you could say that, oh, well, we'll just adjust roles and we'll feel pretty good about what we have. But if he's here, you are in the mix.
You can say like, oh, I feel good about this team either way, but you don't feel the same about this team either way. Like, there's a reason why he's like Michigan wants him to come to Michigan. Right. But then I will kind of say it though, like, you still love the other additions they've made and the way they're building this roster.
This is going to sound like a criticism, but you're not the same team if Merez Johnson is starting at the 4. You're just not. So
right. Or Will Cheddar, or Oscar Goodman, or a small ball 4. Yeah, 100%. And that's why, I mean, he's an NBA draft prospect. He's a guy that I think would go in the first round either way. I hope he's not listening, but just kidding. Memorial Day weekend coming up. Hopefully this got you through some sort of drive. Hopefully our math on the college football playoff stuff wasn't too bad. I don't know what would happen. I'm going to look after this and dig into it with the conference championship games in the Big 10 and SEC. But Anthony, hope you have a great Memorial Day weekend. Any plans this weekend?
I think the plans are having no plans. So that's a good place to start.
Yeah, the weather is tough around here. It's ruining a lot of things, but hopefully people enjoy their company and all the different activities they can hopefully get in the weather. But happy Memorial Day weekend, and we will see everyone on Monday.